What's up, everybody? My name is Rhiannon Roseland, and I am the founder of Conscious Economics, and I'm here today with Ajani Charles, and we are going to talk to you about social impact investing, socially responsible investing. These are lots of ways to say the same thing, but really trying to drive our investment strategy toward building and creating a better, more sustainable world. And of course, I'm so excited to have you here out of all people to do this particular teaching, because you, to me, exemplify somebody who's done the inner work, who's really been able to cultivate a better understanding of yourself and your values, and everything that you do, whether it's the work you take on, the way that you invest your money, the art forms that you embody and create, they all kind of align back to your core value system. So thank you so much for being here with us today. We're going to be talking about social impact investing today, and I think that there's a lot of terms kind of buzzing around out there, and people kind of get confused in terms of what the difference between some of these terms really are and what they mean. So there's ESG, there's socially responsible investing, and then there's impact investing. And although a lot of people use these terms interchangeably, they kind of mean different things. So it would be good to kind of break that down.
Yeah, I'm familiar with socially responsible investing, but if you could break down ESG and impact investing first, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So it stands for environmental, social, and governance, which is the three pillars that now people are looking at in terms of how companies are performing and how well they're doing in those areas in terms of being able to measure their socially responsible impact. So for instance, if we look at an individual company, we'd be looking at them within these three pillars and seeing, is this company environmentally responsible? Are they taking action towards ensuring that their practices and the way they develop their products and the way they operate their factory or business is in alignment with the goals of creating a more sustainable planet and all the factors that influence climate change? When we look at the social piece, how is this company's products and services and the way that they conduct themselves having an influence on the society at large? How are they, dealing with issues of racism? How are they dealing with issues of, community well-being? So being able to measure them against those markers. And last is governance. That's the G. And governance is really about how the governance and management of that company aligns with socially responsible practices. So we look at, how equitable is the board of this particular company? How are the management and executives practicing socially responsible behaviors and modeling in order to ensure that the well-being of people, planet, and profit are considered when they're working and when they're creating? So usually when we think about ESG, we think about investors really wanting to measure a company's well-being against those three pillars, but they're always looking still for the financial performance as well. So ESG does not exclude financial performance, and a lot of the thinking now is that when companies are being responsible in these areas, they're actually more financially successful as well. So no longer is this idea of only investing in, socially responsible practices. It's good for the planet, but it's not good for the wallet, or it's not good for the shareholder. That's not true anymore. We see that companies that are having that forward vision in terms of how they're looking to adhere their practices across these pillars are actually performing better overall, and they're drawing more interest and investment. The people that are listening right now are probably wondering, well, how do I know if a company is even, measuring itself against these environmental, social, and governance markers, and where can I find products to invest in that are aligned with ESG goals? And so first and foremost, there's a couple of things to note. One, most major corporations and companies now will report on where they are on their ESG performance. So it's usually something that you can find on a company's website. Go to your local advisor, Google and research companies on your own and really see where they measure up. So just as simple, putting in a name of a company paired with ESG on a Google search will hopefully yield some results. And if those results aren't easy accessible to find, the chances are that that company hasn't put a focus there, because if we're doing it, we want to talk about it. Now, you said you're quite familiar with socially responsible investing. Do you want to explain a little bit what that's all about for our listeners?
Yeah, from my perspective, if you invest in a socially responsible index fund, for example, you're investing in a wide array of companies that align with the values that you describe.
Yeah. And the socially responsible investing, I think, can be very personal to each individual. So I know that different people have different values and different things are important. Some people really feel called to the environment, and so they would not want to have anything within their investment portfolio that was contributing to the harm or destruction of the environment. And then the last one is really impact investing. And so to break down impact investing is more about the actual impact and outcome societally or socially on an issue as it is to the financial return. So a lot of the times when we talk about impact investing, we'll see a private investor giving a not-for-profit or another organization funds to be able to build more affordable housing or to create a nourishing food program in an underserved community. So they're really looking at the impact as their investment. How many people have you fed? How many units of affordable homes have you built, as opposed to just seeing it as a financial gain and return. So impact investing is usually done sort of privately and within the private side. And then when we look at ESG and we look at socially responsible investing, we see that in the public domain, and you can access that through trading in publicly, traded companies and all of these kinds of pieces. So that's kind of the breakdown there. Now, one of the things that has always really interested me in talking to you is your knowledge around mindfulness and how mindfulness can really be a tool to not only become a better, more socially responsible investor, but also a better, more mindful business leader in general. So how did you get to that place and that work? And can you describe that a little bit?
It's been a long journey of self-discovery for me and introspection and healing over the course of the last 7 years. And before that, I didn't have a clear idea of who I was and of who I wanted to be. My goals and values were very ambiguous, and the state of my career and the state of my finances reflected that ambiguity. And different mindfulness practices, different communities that helped me to cultivate mindfulness, helped me to go in the opposite direction. And I'm at a point now where my goals and values are clear to me, and I'm far more present, far less preoccupied with my notions of the past and past traumas, and far less preoccupied with idealized visions of the future than I was before. So mindfulness is huge when it comes to structuring your career and managing your finances. And I wish I knew that 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Me too. I mean, to be honest with you, I think we live in a world that everything's so fast-paced and there's so much distraction around us that a lot of us don't ever think about taking time to come inwards and really reflect on where we're at, what matters to us, what's working for us, what's not working for us. And without that practice, we really don't know where our social values are and where we want to align them to, because we haven't really asked ourselves those questions. So if someone was watching right now and just starting out and was interested in, what you've been able to do, where would you advise them to start? Like, what's the first place that they could start in trying to better understand themselves?
If we're talking about finances specifically, it's paying attention to where your money is going, how you're spending it, how you're saving it if you're saving it, and how you're investing, and understanding that aspect of your life, but also taking the time and energy to understand what your goals and values are and determining if your goals and values are in alignment with how you're allocating your money. I think it's also important for young people especially to understand the differences between assets and liabilities. Assets are things that create value and money over time, whereas liabilities depreciate in value and take money away from you over time. But also people, environments, habits, and thought patterns can also be thought of in terms of assets and liabilities. And that's something that I wish I knew, 7, 10, 15 years ago. So your friends, your certain family members, the shows that you watch, the movies that you watch, the music that you listen to, the environments that you frequent, all of these things can either contribute to the life that you want to create for yourself if you've taken the time and energy to envision that life, or they can take you in the opposite direction. And without making that distinction between assets and liabilities, both material and non-material. Before 2014, I was just completely on autopilot, completely unaware of how I was spending my money, who I was working with in terms of colleagues and clients, how I was spending my time, the media that I was consuming. If you're not addressing these things, they can have huge adverse financial effects on you. So mindfulness practices like journaling, talking to a counselor or psychotherapist to understand what your relationship with money is and what your relationship to yourself and your family members is. It's hugely important because all these things will impact how you use money.
But how do you practice socially responsible investing in your life right now? Like, what does that look like for you?
For me, socially responsible investing came about through the process of introspection that I described to you and mapping out what my goals and values are.
Can you say what some of your goals and values are?
Things like mindfulness, punctuality, generosity, diversity in terms of the people that I do business with. These are just some of the many values that I've mapped out, and then I check in with myself on a daily basis and on a weekly basis to determine if how I'm spending, saving, and investing money aligns with that.
So let's kind of venture into this idea of how we take these individual practices and these individual tools and apply them to how we think about business. Because a business or a corporation is its own entity and it has its own impact on society. Do you think that business leaders could benefit from doing these kinds of practices and thinking about them in terms of their business?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, one of the most valuable skills in business and finance, and this is scientifically proven, you can Google it, is emotional intelligence, which is the capacity to understand, accept, and skillfully use one's emotions and the emotions of others within the context of business and finance. And there's a lot of research that shows that most hiring managers focus more on emotional intelligence, which is known as EQ, over intellect, which is IQ. When it comes to investing in the stock market, investing in bonds, investing in private businesses, the fundamentals of doing that, like the technical aspects of doing that, are pretty simple. There's so many books on it. In terms of investing in stocks and bonds, what will increase your probability of getting the most returns is staying in the game and not moving your investments, not trading. And to do that, you need to create some emotional distance between yourself and what the market is doing. And to get to that point, it requires cultivating mindfulness, meditating,
yes,
engaging in activities that create flow states like physical exercise or hatha yoga, etc. In terms of business, your ability to regulate your emotions and to understand your emotions is everything.
So what you're really saying, what I'm understanding, what you're teaching me right now is that investing in regulating our emotions is a very tactical tool for being a better investor in the financial markets, which is so amazing. That's mindfulness and money right there for you. And what I love about this is, when we look at the research and we look at folks that are actually using investment tools and choosing investment strategies that are aligned with their social values, social impact investing, they actually tend to have a better emotional regulation over market volatility because they know that their investments are aligned with their environmental and social goals and the things that they really care about. So as the market becomes volatile, they feel more safe to hold on to those values because they are more personally aligned. So it does actually yield better results in the long run. The other really interesting thing, Asil, our CEO, was talking about in the module before that risk comes, part and parcel with investing. But when we really think about long term, looking at something like ESG in relation to investing, those companies that are really sort of putting themselves to the test on environmental, social, and governance impact will have usually a better trajectory. They're going to do better in the long run and yield better results for those that are investing in them. So it's actually something that can help alleviate some of the risk to be able to invest in companies that are thinking that way as opposed to the ones that aren't. And I think that that's a really, really interesting connection. One of my practices, if I feel extremely overwhelmed, is stepping away from all screens and all distractions, going into a quiet space, taking some deep cleansing breaths, and then I just place my 2 fingers over my heart space and I actually pitter patter back and forth over my heart space. So this was a soothing tool that I was taught by my therapist that I work with. And so this really helps me kind of get back anchored into my body. Do you have some tips and tools for how you sort of help yourself emotionally regulate?
Yeah, I have so many. Journaling, as I mentioned, is a huge one. I use an app called Mind to track my emotions 3 times a day. So through that app, I journal 3 times a day, but I also map out exactly what I'm feeling. And being able to articulate what my emotional state is in a moment helps me to feel less driven by my emotions, less pushed around by them, let's say. Because I know that I'm angry, anxious, depressed, etc. So having that awareness makes these emotions seem less powerful than they may be. Having a support system, mentors and friends that I know that I can be 100% transparent with, being able to call them when I'm in emotional distress, that's a huge one. Cognitive behavioral therapy. I work with a cognitive behavioral therapist, but I also use a cognitive behavioral therapy app called Thought Diary. So I was telling you earlier that I had all these fears and insecurities related to some recent speaking engagements. At a certain level, my inner child felt unworthy of the opportunity, of the budget, etc. So through working with my cognitive behavioral therapist and on my own using the Thought Diary app, I challenged those negative beliefs. Wow. It's like, is this actually true? Am I not technically capable of pulling this off? And then systematically saying, well, I've successfully completed all these other speaking engagements. I've helped this client with this. This is what these clients and colleagues have said about the work that I do. And eventually through that process, it's like these negative beliefs, they don't make any sense.
Yeah, they're irrational.
Yeah, they're completely irrational. Yeah. So I'm just not going to pay attention to them. Yeah. And sure enough, the speaking engagements went incredibly well. Mm-hmm. But they wouldn't have had I simply tried to ignore those thoughts, tried to ignore those emotions, yes. Etc. And again, mindfulness practices, forgiveness meditation within the context of business. If you're really pushing the envelope, if you have ambitious goals, you're going to disappoint yourself. You're going to disappoint others. Other people will inevitably betray you. If you end up interacting with 2,000 people over the course of your entrepreneurial journey, at some point, someone's going to betray you. And being able to engage in a forgiveness practice or forgiving yourself and others through journaling and other tools is huge.
Absolutely. And all of these practices and tools, they may sound, foreign or scary to some that are listening right now, but they're actually quite simple to start to cultivate. And throughout this program, there is meditations and worksheets attached that help you to start this process. So you're not alone. We're here with you to help you. Now, the other thing that I have to kind of call out right now is that sometimes when people watch people like you and I speaking about this, we get categorized as like, oh, those kinds of weird people who are doing all of this. Well, I don't have these sorts of issues or problems, and I don't need to think about these things as in depth. And one of the things that I really want to point out is that we all have a long way to go in terms of learning about our emotions, how to name them, how to regulate them, because it's not something that we're traditionally taught in school. It's not something that our previous generations have really been able to cultivate. And so when we want to think about being, socially active and cultivating a better world and building new systems that are more equitable, it does start with that emotional and social learning within ourselves. And when you hear people talking about, freely talking about working with their cognitive behavioral therapist or, practicing tools to calm their nervous system, it's usually a sign of someone who's done a lot of work and who now feels, comfortable to speak about these things publicly. And I hope more and more we see more leaders that are in prominent positions like yourself that are open and willing to speak about these things, because that's how we transform and change the world for sure. To just wrap up, I want to just recap a couple of key pieces that we've learned here today together. So we've learned the difference between ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing. We've learned about what socially responsible investing is, and of course we've talked about impact investing. We've also talked about the core fundamental things that we need to invest in order to be a good investor, and it starts with really focusing on our personal relationships, our emotional well-being, and our emotional regulation skills, and our education. And education is not just formal university or college, it's education about ourselves. And I just want to say that, I never in a million years imagined that I would be a successful entrepreneur. I'd be able to teach other people. My upbringing and my childhood and everything that was around me was incredibly challenging, including addiction issues and poverty issues and all sorts of things. And I know that there's folks that are watching right now that feel so far away from this idea of cultivating, a healthy relationship with money, having an investment strategy. It feels so far, but the first step is listening and having the conversation. I'm so excited to have sat here today and chat with you, and thank you so much for all of your knowledge and work. And where can everyone find you?
On social media, I'm Ajani Photo, AJANIPHOTO. Look up Ajani Charles on LinkedIn. My portfolio is available at www.ajani.ca.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.